Welcome back to Licks of the Beast. Let's talk about Metallica. It's actually a little weird that I haven't ever made a video about them on this channel, considering they were one of the bands that really got me into practicing the guitar seriously. Actually, their music is what led to my first real breakthrough as an aspiring guitarist, but that's a story for a different video. What might surprise you even more is that until November 2023, I had never seen Metallica live, not once. And for a band that's meant so much to me for so long, that always felt like something unfinished. But that finally changed when I saw them in Detroit 2 years ago, and then again more recently here in Toronto. And I'm not saying this lightly, both shows were unforgettable. Now, I only caught the first night of both shows, and I heard that in both cases, night 2 was even better, which is absolutely amazing. Now, these shows brought back a flood of memories, and they reminded me why I connected so deeply with their music in the first place. So in this video, I'm going to share my experience of the most recent show in Toronto. I'll give you my thoughts as objectively as I can, as well as how I felt as a fan and how the performance hit me emotionally. I'm also going to tell you about the one thing that left me feeling a little uneasy. It's nothing huge, but it's something that I've been thinking about ever since, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too. If this is your first time here, welcome to Licks of the Beast. My name is Nico Falco. I've been a guitar player for over 35 years, and this is a place where I like to talk about guitars and heavy metal music. If you look through the channel, you'll find everything from covers to tutorials to guitar reviews, as well as some history and fun facts about the music that you and I are so passionate about. I hope you'll feel right at home and that you'll stick around for more. Now, before I tell you about the shows, let me just tell you a quick story about how I became a fan of Metallica way back in the summer of 1988. It was the night of the neighborhood Italian fest. I was hanging out with my older cousin on the main street near the local church, and all of a sudden this old Dodge Aries with tinted windows pulls up, and this guy's blasting some thrash metal thing in the middle of all these elderly Italians walking towards the church where there was a stage set up for a local wedding band to play some live music, which was going to be mostly older Italian songs. Now, I was just standing there like, who is this psychopath? And is there any way I could hang out with him? He pulls over towards us, rolls down the window, and it turns out it's this guy Claudio who was going to school with my cousin, and he was known to be the guy when it came to heavy metal. He was the guy who could tell you about any band under the sun, and he had a huge collection of albums, some of which he kept on rotation in his car in these massive cassette carrying cases because there was no Spotify back then. Anyhow, so my cousin introduced me to him as someone who was really into heavy metal, and we got to talking. Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Motley Crue, AC/DC, and then he asked me if I liked Metallica. And there I felt like the most ignorant idiot, because even though I kept seeing their logo and their album covers in the magazines and on some people's back patches, I had never bothered to check out their music because some other kids I knew who were into metal had told me they were just noise and screaming. So when I said I'd never heard anything from them, he looked at me like my father after he saw my last report card. Except, unlike my father, he said, let's go to the car. So the three of us get in his car, and he pops Ride the Lightning into the cassette player. And there, my head just exploded. I was like, why have I been missing out on this? Now, after listening to a few songs, I was already hooked. So a day or two later, I went to the record store and I bought Ride the Lightning on cassette. And shortly after, I bought what was at the time their latest release, the 598 EP, Garage Days Revisited. And I love that one too. I still think it's an awesome collection of well-arranged, well-performed cover songs. I love the sound of it, the vibe is killer, and what better way to introduce your new bass player, especially under the incredibly sad circumstances. I got Kill 'Em All and Master of Puppets as soon as I could, and then, a few months later, And Justice for All was released, and I absolutely devoured that album. I listened to it over and over and over again until I had every note, every word, every riff, every solo, every drum fill memorized. Every bass note, unfortunately, no, because, you know. Then, in 1991, the Black Album comes out, and that one left me a bit, meh. I knew it was a great album, objectively, but I didn't enjoy the vibe on it, I didn't care for many of the songs, and it just didn't sound like Metallica to me at the time. And by that point, I had already become a massive Iron Maiden fan, plus I was getting into the old blues legends like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Robert Johnson, so I found myself becoming less and less interested in what Metallica were doing. It wasn't until Death Magnetic that I would rediscover an affinity for Metallica. And while Hardwired didn't do that much for me, I found 72 Seasons to be a really good album, and the first single, Lux Eterna, really hit me right here. You know, the fact that it's hit the lights, but with the idea that this is deep down who we still are and who we will always be. Man, I was 13 years old all over again. And it was with this feeling that I headed down to Detroit to watch the show in 2023. I was like a born-again Metallica fan in a way, and I was gonna see them play live for the very first time. And keep in mind, there was a time when I would watch Cliff 'Em All almost daily. So going to this show brought back so many great memories and strong feelings. I did have a few concerns going in, and even though some of them ended up being validated, it was still a great show overall, and it only added to my renewed appreciation for the band. But here I want to talk about the second time I saw them, a year and a half later, right here in Toronto. Because that show didn't just confirm some of the things I'd picked up on in Detroit, it also gave me a different perspective on a few others. And it made me rethink the way I'd felt about parts of that first experience. Now, if you had the chance to watch Metallica on this 72 Seasons tour, I'd love to know your thoughts on the show and what was your standout moment. Hey guys, quick moment here because this is absolutely unreal. Licks of the Beast just turned 5 years old. It all started with a tutorial of Adrian Smith's guitar solo on the Iron Maiden song Sea of Madness, and that was published on August 4th, 2020. And since then, we've published close to 350 videos, made 55,000 new friends, and hit a total of nearly 7 million views. I honestly can't believe it's been that long. Some of you have been watching since the very beginning, and I really can't thank you enough. But whether you've been here for 5 years or for 5 minutes, it really means the world to me that you're a part of this. So to celebrate, I'm doing a little giveaway just to say thank you. There are 3 prizes of equal value, so when you enter, make sure to tell me which of the 3 you would like. So first, I'm giving away one of my signature bridge humbuckers, the Hayabusa by Corgan Pickups. You can pick the color, the cover, whatever configuration you want. Now, it's the pickup I'm using on videos like Chris Oliva's guitar solo on Edge of Thorns, Vivian Campbell's solo on Deal's the Last in Line, and Eddie Van Halen's solo on I'll Wait. If you like a pickup that cuts through, packs a punch, screams like a banshee, but still retains clarity, this thing is an absolute beast. Pun intended. Next up, a 10-pack of guitar strings from SIT Strings in whichever gauge you prefer. I've been using these for some time now, and they're a very important part of my gear because I like to stay in tune, and I like strings that have just the right amount of brightness and that can really take a beating. And third, I'm giving away a 1-hour virtual guitar lesson with me. During the course of that hour, we can work on whatever you want. Tone, technique, basics, shredding, songwriting, going over the details of a song, riff, or solo. It'll be totally up to you. Big thanks to Corgan Pickups and SIT Strings for making this possible. I proudly endorse both, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement of this meaningful landmark. To enter, go to my website, licksofthebeast.com/giveaway. Enter your name, email address, and which of the 3 prizes you prefer. 3 winners will be selected at random on August 25th. Thanks again for all the support over these 5 years. It's been an amazing ride so far, and I'm so excited about the next 5 years will bring because I can assure you it'll be awesome. Okay, so first of all, the intro with Sergio Leone's The Ecstasy of Gold from the spaghetti western The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This is arguably the most iconic and most powerful intro music of all time. And for me, who watched westerns like that one as a kid in Italy and then read Italian comics like Tex and Zagor, which were set in the Far West, and if you've never read those, I really recommend you check them out because they're awesome. The scenes from the movie and the music just gave me goosebumps all over and a huge adrenaline rush. As the intro faded, the show started off with Creeping Death. And that immediately took me right back to watching them play that song on Cliff 'Em All, learning to play it on guitar, and eventually playing it with my own band. I gotta tell you, Creeping Death sounds so heavy live. And even though the riffs are pretty simple and straightforward, there are many spots where everything needs to be really tight, like the intro, outro, or the instrumental pre-chorus. They absolutely nailed all of that. From there, they went right into Harvester of Sorrow, Now, they played this one tight and punchy and with a dark intensity of the And Justice for All album. It felt so awesome to see them perform this song so faithfully to the original version, as it's always been a highlight of that album for me. Holier Than Thou was next, and that's definitely a song that, for me at least, works better live than on the album. I always thought it was kind of flat on the recorded version, but live, it felt so much more alive. You could really hear and feel all those punchy accents. The fourth song was King Nothing from the Load album, and this one too felt much heavier and punchier live. It also felt a lot bigger. That riff with Lars' solid beat really crushes. And also the chorus with James playing droning chords and Kirk playing the higher notes on top, that sounds so good. This really is a killer song. Up next was 72 Seasons, and that was actually the first one from the new album, which is a bit of a strange thing to do when you're touring to support said new album. But the song is wicked live and it's really powerful. The way the song flows from the heavy groove of the verse to the breakdown pre-chorus, made even cooler with the strobe lights, to the full speed ahead chorus is really awesome. The next song was If Darkness Had a Sun, which is another one from the new album. Now, I hadn't realized just how cool the intro and outro were until I experienced the song live. And it's weird because the way Metallica writes, often putting riffs together, then putting melodies on top of that and arranging it so that it flows while keeping it interesting, you'd think the songs would work better in the studio than live. Instead, I find it's quite the opposite. They're good in the studio, but they really come to life on stage and the arrangement feel so much more natural to me that way. Now, either way, one thing that Sarah and I both noticed was how much the entire band seems to enjoy playing the new songs. You can tell they're really into it, and all four guys look genuinely happy to play these tunes. Kirk and Rob's improvised thing was next, and since we really didn't care for it in Detroit, we took advantage of it to go to the merch booth to grab some t-shirts. They had a lot of designs, and some of the stuff looked really cool. Now, I got this shirt in Detroit, so this time around I went with this other one because I like the design and the color scheme. Plus, it's got that old school logo, which I really love. We got back from the merch booth just in time for The Day That Never Comes. And that was a good thing because Sarah loves that song. Now, I always thought it was a pretty good tune, but live, it's something else. And I know I'm saying this about a lot of these songs, especially the new ones, but I really didn't expect them to work as well as they did in that context. But anyway, The Day That Never Comes, you could really feel the intensity of the song's subject matter, and this is yet another one of those songs where the arrangement just makes so much more sense on the big stage. Especially that hammer-on riff in the instrumental section and how they go in and out of that part with different chord progressions. That actually sounded really good. Orion, the instrumental from Master of Puppets, was next, and this one was one of my top 3 songs for the night. It was their way of honoring Cliff Burton because he totally owned that track on the album. He was responsible for many of the parts, melody lines, harmonies, and the arrangements, as far as I know. The band performed this one with so much feeling, it was truly mesmerizing. Now, I've loved Orion ever since I saw a Metallica tribute band play it at a Battle of the Bands back when I was like 15 years old. Their bass player was full-on Cliff Burton. Bell bottoms, the hair, the stance, and the playing. Now, back then I had never seen a cover band that good. And they were really tight. They had the feel and the intensity down, and it made me appreciate the song on a whole other level. And hearing Metallica do it live brought all of that back. The rhythm parts were locked in, and the harmony section really stood out. And that part's not easy to pull off. You know, there's a slow bend, you hold the note, and a bend and release, and doing that without getting pitchy is already a challenge. Doing it as a harmony with another guitar player on a massive stage with sound bouncing around all over the place and the chaos that comes with a show of that size, that's where you see how truly professional these guys are. It sounded great. The thing is, Metallica's harmonies don't always land live. Usually because they're up in a higher register with tight intervals, and without a rhythm guitar underneath, it could sound a bit dissonant. But Orion doesn't do that. They're playing wider intervals, so it fills the space beautifully, and live it just sounded huge. Kirk was playing his greeny Les Paul, and that guitar has a thing to it. There's this little quack in the tone, it's sharp, vocal, and it really cuts through the mix, so it made his part really pop. The solos sounded great, the transitions were all spot on, and that whole melodic section that starts off with the bass line just before the harmonies was just beautiful. It was dreamy, reflective, pensive. It just pulls you in. From there, they went into Nothing Else Matters, and that went as expected. Everyone got out their phones, turned on their flashlights, and the whole thing. The song sounded really good, and if nothing else, it validated the way the band blew up after it was released as a single all those years ago. After Nothing Else Matters, James asked the crowd if Toronto liked really heavy music, and people of course said yes. James asked again if Toronto really liked heavy music, and people again said yes, we like heavy music. So they went into Sad But True. Not Dyer's Eve, not Damage Incorporated. Sad But True. I mean, it's got a very heavy riff, I'll give him that. But as a song, it's not that heavy. It sounded really good though. Punchy, tight, and all those snare drum and guitar unison chugs sounded amazing. They followed that up with Fuel, one of the more intense and fast-paced songs from their Load Reload era, and it's definitely a fun one. As soon as James starts the song, there are flames shooting up from the stage, and those things are really hot. There are also flames on the tower screens all around, and that makes everyone in the crowd go absolutely mental. The main riff really helps get the crowd going, and the secondary riff is so great for spooling up tension. I always liked the chorus for how melodic it is, yet it still manages to be a massive rush with the way it ends. The second last song of the night was Seek and Destroy, and what a great vibe this one had. This is another one that took me back to Cliff 'Em All and to my early days of learning how to play guitar. I was actually really impressed by the band's energy this far into the set. Unsurprisingly, they ended the night with Master of Puppets. That's the ultimate live song. The opening, the main riff, the verse riff, the killer chorus, the chugging interlude, the adrenaline rush guitar solo. It's just massive all the way through. Now, of course, my gripe with that song live has always been the interlude harmony. It sounds great on the album, but live never sounded good to me. And I know exactly why it doesn't, and I have 2 or 3 tweaks in mind that might make it sound a little better. And actually, that's going to be a whole other video because I think it's an interesting topic that deserves to be addressed separately. Plus, I'd love to know what you all think of my proposed solutions, so be on the lookout for that at some point in the future. Other than that though, the song really sounded fantastic. Both James and Kirk's solos sounded great, and actually I realized also with Nothing Else Matters that I really wish James would play a bit more solos because he's actually a pretty good lead guitar player. He's always said that he thinks of himself as a guy that almost plays drums on guitar, and that's actually a great way to describe his rhythm playing. But he's also really great at creating melodies, both vocally and on the guitar. And his solos are always really melodic with great phrasing and expressive articulation. So they're not fancy, of course. He's not throwing in all kinds of outside notes, and he doesn't play modally or anything like that. He just sticks to pentatonic or natural minor, but he uses those basic scales very efficiently to come up with these really nice melodic solos. And he also has some pretty good control. His vibrato can be quite good and very expressive. Sometimes he'll hold a note like a bend, and it really swells and rings out beautifully. I think James is a better lead guitar player than people give him credit for, or than he gives himself credit for. I'd love to hear more leads from him, and honestly, a James Hetfield solo album? That would be so sick. Now, before I get into the one thing I didn't enjoy quite as much, I want to make a couple of quick points. First off, the band's musicianship. Now, I know Lars and Kirk get a fair bit of flack online, but honestly, they're playing really well. I mean, yeah, Lars is not Charlie Benante or Dave Lombardo, but he really has a solid groove, and his arrangements and drum parts are always interesting. And you can tell that he really feels strongly about the music. His energy and personality are a huge part of the band's success, so to dismiss him based on his technical limitations, I think that's rather short-sighted. Plus, I find him to be plenty skilled for what the songs need. Same thing for Kirk Hammett. Yeah, he'll mess up a lick here and there, but a lot of people do. I mean, it is live, and for the most part, he is playing his old solos pretty close to the original. And those aren't necessarily all that easy to pull off. Now, something people tend to forget is that Kirk is also playing all the same crazy-ass rhythm parts as James on top of the solos. And they're locked in tight. The band sounds sharp, and it's clear that they've put in the work to keep things tight at this scale. And speaking of scale, that brings me to my next point, the stage setup. Now, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't totally sold on the round stage at first. It felt like the band was a bit scattered, like they weren't quite as connected as they would have been on a regular stage where they're all lined up together. Until I saw AC/DC play a similar sized stadium in Pittsburgh a few weeks later. We had decent seats, but because we were a bit too close to one side of the stage, we could mostly only see Angus and Brian. Without the big screens, we would have missed everything else. And that's when it clicked. With the round stage, everyone has a shot at seeing what's going on. Plus, with James's mic stand and Lars's drums even moving around, you get to see all four guys no matter where you're seated. And for a show this big, that's a pretty great thing. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about the one thing that I enjoyed less. And this is something that I'm still wrestling with because honestly, it makes me feel like a bit of an asshole. So I wanna throw in a little disclaimer here. What I'm about to say doesn't come from a place of gatekeeping or from wanting to just shit on people or talk down to fans or whatever, because it's not that at all. And it's not coming from that I was a real fan before they sold out kind of mindset either. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've noticed that some people, when they read or listen to an opinion piece, have a hard time picking up on nuance. It's like they miss the difference between someone saying, this shit sucks, and someone saying, nah, I don't like this. Now, I'd never say something is shit because I'm not the arbiter of what's good and what's not. I don't know what's good. I just know what I like. I know I can be objective about certain things, but when it comes to what makes a good song or a good show or a good anything, there's always going to be a certain amount of subjectivity in all of that. And because of that, I would never frame anything in those terms. Also because it's kind of disrespectful to people who do enjoy that thing. People who might have strong memories tied to it or a real emotional connection to it. So who am I to say that something they love is shit? So if I say I don't like something, I'm only talking about my personal enjoyment of it. And the reason I say it out loud is because I think it's worth having a conversation. Someone else might chime in and go, hey, I think the reason you don't like it is because you're looking at it from this angle. Try seeing it from this perspective instead. And I might change my mind. That's something that happens to me every now and then, and I'm always thankful for it. Okay, so the one thing I didn't enjoy that much was essentially just the overall scope of the show. I get that Metallica is very popular and they have to play these giant stadium shows. I mean, they're playing 2 full nights everywhere they go. But what I'm saying here is about my personal enjoyment of the show, the way I enjoy a show. Metallica seem to have an unusually high level of mainstream appeal for the kind of band that they are. I mean, they're a thrash metal band. Now, yeah, they haven't always played thrash, of course. There was a period from the Black Album onward where the sound was much more accessible. But even during those years, they were still playing their thrash tunes live. They're doing shows as big as what Guns N' Roses do, but they're not Guns N' Roses. They're a very different band. So it's kind of strange that a band that sounds like that, with songs that have long structures, unusual arrangements, and that kind of heaviness, ends up playing to these huge audiences made up in a fairly large part of people who don't really care about heavy metal all that much. So I'm there watching this heavy metal show as a metal fan, surrounded by a lot of people who aren't really into metal. Now, some are there just for Enter Sandman, maybe Sad But True, Nothing Else Matters, Fuel. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they shouldn't be there. Even if you like just one song from a band and you want to experience that live and go to the show for that one moment, and do it. That's awesome. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just talking about my own experience being in the middle of that crowd where I feel a little bit out of place. Or maybe just a bit awkward because I don't fully understand the way that experience plays out. I catch myself wishing that the crowd was just a bit smaller and maybe a little more into it. Because I know for a lot of the shows, some people in that audience don't really know what to make of those heavier songs. They're not familiar with them and they don't particularly enjoy that kind of music. So they might be having a full-on conversation about how they're going to rebuild their deck or whatever during a song that I really like. So it's a little bit of a weird coexistence. And of course, I'm comparing this to the experience of watching other heavy metal bands play arenas or, smaller venues where the crowd is still big, but It's less than half the size, and most of the people in attendance are fans of the band, or at least into metal music in general. So from that perspective, I find it to be a more immersive and more fulfilling experience. The other little thing, and this is really just me, I didn't love the beach balls at the end. I know it's kind of cool and some people really like it, but I don't know, metal show with a bunch of beach balls, to me it felt a little weird. Now, setting aside the scope or the magnitude of the show or the beach balls, just seeing Metallica live after all these years meant more than I expected. It took me back to being a teenager, playing along to those songs, studying the riffs, the solos, the arrangements. I mean, their music wasn't just part of the soundtrack to my youth, it helped shape who I became as a musician. So this one wasn't just another show. It felt like closing a loop that had been left open for 35 years. I really enjoyed making this video, so please do let me know if you'd like to see more of these concert reviews in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.